Thank you. Obviously, we're thrilled to be in the position that we are. But as I said last night, I feel like we've earned our way to this position. We recognize we have a tremendous team ahead of us tomorrow afternoon. They've been terrific all year. They've got some players with various skills and talents, and we're going to have to bring our best tomorrow night to win. But that's what we aim to do.
All right, we have, just put your hands up for questions. We'll go in the front. Just give your name and affiliation on the first go.
Hey guys, Pat Brennan, Cincinnati Enquirer. Chris, this is for you. It seems like the bigs have faced a pretty unique challenges at each phase of the tournament here. What kind of a challenge is facing this 7'1", 300-pounder?
The biggest. I mean, Karnowski is he's a load. I think Xavier fans will harken back to Matt Stainbrook. The similarities are they're eerie. I mean, he's 3 or 4 inches taller than Matt. No disrespect to Matt, he's in better shape, and he has a great touch, a unique ability to pass from his position. He affects shots defensively at the rim. And Gonzaga does a really good job of keeping him in the lane defensively, and that's one of the reasons they have the best defense in the country by their numbers. So he's a big challenge. I love our post players. They've played their tails off here during tournament play, and they're going to need to do that tomorrow in order for us to advance.
Go in the back left, standing.
Jacob Thorpe, Spokesman Review. Chris, a lot of your opponents in the tournament have talked about the difficulty or how they struggled with your team's ability to shift defenses on the fly. What's the key to making that work, and is that an area in which your team has improved over the last month or so?
It's definitely an area that our team's improved. I probably didn't give them a chance to improve in it early in the year because we didn't play multiple defenses. But I think we recognized as a program that in order to give our guys the best chance to compete, that was what we had to do. For us, it doesn't really come down to what our opponent is necessarily trying to do. We have to be able to communicate because different teams are going to attack it differently. With the short turnaround that we have, being able to recognize how Gonzaga wants to attack our zones, I should say, and how they want to attack our man defense is paramount. When we understand that, then it's all about being able to communicate and understand where shooters are, where our positioning needs to be, and then playing with our hair on fire, playing harder. And I think we did that in the second half. And then anytime you play zone, you have to figure out a way to rebound the ball. We didn't do it in the first half of yesterday's game. We did it in the second half, and ultimately that was the reason we were able to pull away.
Left side, fourth row.
Ron Karchik from the San Francisco Chronicle. For any of the big guys, maybe kind of echoing the question to Chris earlier about Karnowski on what kind of challenge he presents and how much, not just being 7'1", but being 300 pounds and as wide and mobile as he is, how difficult that makes that challenge.
I just think we had to come out, be tough, and just contain him and make everything that he gets tough, and he has to work harder for it than we do, and that's just basically it.
Standing, back left.
Just to follow up on that earlier question, what was the impetus to become more multiple with your defenses?
Necessity, the fact that we weren't playing 10, 11 guys. Wanted to keep them fresher. We had guys playing heavy minutes. For instance, Quentin went from playing 14, 15 minutes a game to playing 35 minutes a game. And quite honestly, we weren't very, very good at man. And I'm not going to keep doing something if it's not effective. And I think our players, it took a while for us to be confident in it, to understand all the different slides and things that we had to do. But I think, again, we're far from perfect, but our effort's been good and our understanding's much better.
On the left, third row.
Jeff Ferrato, the Mercury News. For Chris and maybe for one of the players, if you could address this, I'm sure all the Cincinnati people are tired of it, but could you tell us the story about burning the calendars and carrying the ashes around, sort of when that happened, Chris, why you thought of it, how you thought of it, and sort of symbolically what it's meant to you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I know that story's getting a lot of publicity, and but I want to make sure that everybody understands that the character of our guys and their ability to fight through adversity and still believe in our coaching staff and each other is paramount. It started with after our fifth straight loss in a row, which by the way was a brutal stretch. We had Villanova, 3 road games against NCAA tournament teams, followed by Butler at home. We were missing Trayvon for 3 of those games, Edmond for all of them. And, even though that we had lost 5 in a row, I wanted our guys to understand 2 things: the magnitude of the schedule we had just played, and secondly, that we were still an at-large team by every bracketologist known to man. We were still an 8-9 seed, so as low as we felt, we were still a tournament team. They had to believe that and understand there was a lot to play for moving forward. So we had a calendar printed up with the game dates and the scores and the results, and I asked each of the guys to write down one thing without revealing it to their teammates that they were willing to sacrifice, for the remainder of the season, for the betterment of the team. And whether they believed it or not, they did it. We lit the calendars on fire in a big aluminum trash can. It takes a while for things to burn. I didn't realize that. Meeting went about a half hour longer than expected. And then we took the ashes, and I asked Alan Payne to go to Walmart and buy an urn. He got there, and the only one was like pink with green flowers on it, so we didn't think that was appropriate. So he bought a jar that you could see through, and we just called it an urn. And we've kept the ashes in there ever since. And the symbolism is to not worry about what's happened behind us, but to focus on moving forward, control what we can. And we've tried to keep that urn either at the scores table during practice when our players walk in the locker room, on the locker room floor, and our manager's done a terrific job taking it everywhere we've gone.
I mean, like Coach Mack said, it represents the month of February, and we went through a tough 6-game stretch. And as players, when we look at that jar, we just know to move forward, and that the past is done with, and we're going to look forward to playing more games.
Second row, middle.
Jim Wazarski, Cincinnati Enquirer. I guess, Chris, I'll start with you, but if JP, Malcolm, or Trayvon could jump into this. With Quentin, and have, as you mentioned, that role he had to then play and grow into sort of unexpectedly at the time. What was maybe the challenge there as a coach when that happened so suddenly? And then I guess for you upper class backcourt mates, how have you seen him grow since then?
Yeah, to start off, I would say that from day one, Quentin's been a terrific defender, and that gave him a chance. He wasn't the guy that was getting blitzed off the bounce, forgetting assignments. He took great pride in his defense. Where I think Quentin struggled at times was his decision-making and his confidence, like most freshmen. And I think once he sort of got his sea legs under him, was able to play through mistakes, he didn't have that luxury early on because when he made a few mistakes in a row, it was easy to pull him to the side, put him on the bench, and let an all-conference player go in. And, sometimes that's what you need when you're young. You need an opportunity to make a few mistakes and continue to play through them. And I think his teammates have gained a great confidence in Quentin throughout these last couple months. I know I have. He's wide-eyed. He's never at one point ever felt like or showed like he had answers or he was giving excuses as to why he couldn't do something or didn't do something. And that's the trait of a great player and a humble kid. And I'm happy for him because put a lot of time in the film room. I've been on him. I was on him last night, because he still didn't know what he was doing in the zone. But he's done a great job. I'm happy for him.
I would have to say the same as Coach. I mean, Quinn being a freshman, he had to step into that role and become our point guard and our leader on the floor. And I think he's done a tremendous job. He's found his way, and he's definitely been helping us a lot, and we've been helping him too. And I think that works both ways. Obviously, you have to listen to the coaching staff, but you have to listen to the guys that are around you on the floor. And we try to do our best in helping him get through this process just as much as he does his best of getting through it on his own.
Well, the back standing.
Jim Meehan at the Spokesman Review. For Chris, you're able to outscore Arizona in the paint. You're not the tallest team, but what does that speak to of what you're able to do offensively and the guys' individual ability?
Well, I think it shows that our players understand what our purpose is on offense. Regardless of the opponent, it's my belief, and I hope it trickles down to our players, that good teams find a way to get the ball into the lane. And they probably get sick of hearing me say this, but you have to get the ball into what we call the box or the lane and the paint through a few ways, and that is through post-ups, through drives, through offensive rebounds, and through set plays. And our teams really recognize that. The team that can put another team in foul trouble or get in there usually generates open looks either from the perimeter or underneath. You're going to draw second and third defenders, whereas if the ball stays on the perimeter, there's no need to bring a second defender. And that's been an emphasis for a long time at Xavier and will continue to be. And these guys are making it happen through their hard work and their intelligence.
Questions? Go back to Jeff on the left.
Yeah, Quentin, can you just talk about your development and maybe what's been the toughest thing you've had to learn on the fly here as you've been thrust into this new role?
I feel like, the toughest thing I've had to deal with was, playing through my mistakes. I expect so much out of myself that, when I make a mistake, I kind of get down. But, I give credit to these guys and just, putting confidence in me, telling me I have to keep playing and, that everybody makes mistakes. I'm just going to have to play through it. And, I give a lot of credit to these guys for leading me because they never led me into the wrong direction.
Anybody else? We'll go on the right, a few rows back.
Tim Pontus from the Washington Post. You mentioned last night, Chris, that I think something was brought up about Gonzaga, and you kind of dismissed the question about just being two Jesuit schools. But that being said, in a sport where you look around and you see so many of these teams from the Power 5 conferences with these football programs have been able to advance deep in the tournament, is there any sense of pride to have, your school going up against Gonzaga, two of the premier, schools in the country in terms of basketball, without having that extra support involved in it?
Absolutely. I've known Coach Few for a long time, and I think Gonzaga does things the way that we do it. I can't speak for everything they do, but at Xavier, homecoming is around a basketball game. Parents' Weekend is around our Midnight Madness. Everything is so basketball driven. We play Villanova, we play Cincinnati. Like, our students are going to camp out for tickets. And I don't know if that always happens at a place that has a 100,000 seat football stadium. And so we cherish that. And it's a credit to Gonzaga. It's a credit to the guys up here and the guys in the locker room and the ones before them at Xavier, that both of these programs are in the position that we're in. And, I got off the elevator today and, was coming to the bus to come over to the arena, and I saw this monkey running around, and I picked him up. And so if anybody sees Coach Few later on, if they want to return that monkey, it's in our locker room for him.
Well played.
That was some funny stuff that he had the other day.
Any more questions, guys? Okay, we'll dismiss the coach. You're going to stay here.
Okay.
And we're going to send the student athletes to the breakout rooms in the back. And floor is open to Coach Mack for additional questions. Okay. Go right in the front here, third row back.
Hey, Coach. Eamon Brennan from ESPN.com. Can you talk a little bit about Sean O'Mara's evolution as a player over the course of the season? He obviously started off getting a decent number of minutes, kind of went away at stretches throughout the season and has played more. What did you see from him coming down the stretch of the season that led you to give him these opportunities? And then if you could talk about his play.
Yeah, I'm really I'm happy for Sean O'Mara. I think some of the best developmental stories of players are the ones that don't get it handed to them early. I think a year ago about the kid James Farr we had, who struggled to get off the bench his first couple years and turned into an all-conference rebounder his senior year and led us to a 2 seed. And Sean's following that same path. You know, the thing about Sean is he's always been, ever since he came here as a freshman, a terrific back-to-the-basket player, a guy that just really knew how to use his shoulder, had a great touch, and our guys really have confidence in him and have always had confidence in him as a scorer. Where he's grown is he's become a lot better rebounder. He's become a more disciplined defender. And I think with anything in sports, it's all about confidence. And I think Sean, had some in the beginning of the year, lost it, didn't play as well. And we have 3 bigs that are all capable. They're all different. And I give credit to Sean for being able to pull himself out of that rut and play his best basketball in the last month of the season. And we would not be in the position that we're in, playing for a Final Four if it weren't for Sean. And so I'm proud of him, happy for him, because guys that can go through some adversity and aren't handed some things, usually those are success stories that you root for.
Go up front.
Chris, some of the big names in the program's history have been reaching out to this team, I guess starting with Lionel, maybe in Orlando last week. Have you found any one of those conversations to be particularly impactful, or do they all just kind of in the aggregate help?
Well, a lot of them are one-on-ones. They're not necessarily speaking to the team. Now, Lionel was a little bit different. His message, was to the team as a whole. And, I just thought it was appropriate for a guy that in his senior year at one point was 10-9. The team was not in the Big East Conference, really had no chance of making the NCAA tournament as an at-large until they went on a stretch of winning 15 or 16 of their last 17 games. Began with a shot against UC, and then, culminated in an Elite Eight run. And I wanted him to talk to our team about the adversity his team faced and what his team did to sort of flip the script and start playing their best basketball of the year down the stretch. I thought he did a terrific job. And then, guys like Jordan Crawford and David West, Aaron Williams, guys have been, NBA players from our program have reached out. Dave was here at the game last night. And a lot of times those guys just pull our players aside one-on-one because there's a brotherhood and a bond that Xavier basketball players have that's really, really strong. And so if they have words of wisdom, our players are always open ears.
On the left, 5th row.
Coach Jay Alter with the Big East Digital Network, when you were rallying off that brutal schedule that you had in February, it made me think, how does the Big East schedule prepare you for a tournament like this?
Well, if you can win enough games, it allows you to get in. And, the strength of schedule that we face, not only in the non-conference, but certainly our conference, allowed us to be in the position to get in at large with a lot of losses. And, the different styles that you play against, the well-coached teams and the talent and the physicality that you play against, I think prepares you well. Now, what you don't necessarily get prepared for is that finality of you lose and you're done. It's over. And as high as you could be 4 minutes before the game's over and excited, it can be taken in an instant. Our players recognize that from our loss last year against Wisconsin, and hopefully that feeling stays away from us this year.
Stay right there, Dan.
Chris, hey, Dan Wolken, USA Today. Curious why, when you started your career, did you take a job coaching girls basketball? And as you are in that world for a few years, sort of what did you see as your path at that point in your career?
Well, number one, I took the job. I had come back from overseas where my career was cut short with injuries, and I didn't have a job. I became a assistant manager at a video store, and had free time. My sister was playing varsity basketball. The varsity coach was now moonlighting as the JV coach too, because the JV coach just took a full-time job and didn't have the time to coach, and found out that my sister, her brother had just come back from overseas, and coach said, "Hey, would you want to coach?" And I was like, "Girls basketball? I mean, really?" But it was awesome. You know, first year I think we were like 17-4. I thought I was John Wooden. I was a JV coach, and it was like you couldn't mess with my set plays. And then the very next year at the same school, we were 4-17 because they moved all 5 kids up to varsity that were sophomores, and so that was a lesson in humility. And to be honest with you, I coached girls basketball because it was a job that I earned and I got, and it's basketball. And I was in charge of my own team. I wasn't an assistant coach. And then I became a varsity coach and would take my varsity team over to Skip's practices for 4 years. And eventually, you know, he hired me as a director of operations. But, you know, I learned a whole lot, you know, as a varsity coach. There's so many good coaches around the country. Elementary school, high school, girls, guys, boys, girls, doesn't matter. But a lot of them don't get their shot. And I'm forever grateful to Skip Prosser for him allowing me to coach on his staff.
Left against the curtain, Josh.
Josh Peter, USA Today. How is it you ended up hiring Luke Burry, and what has he brought to the staff?
Luke has been a Xavier fan for a long time. I first got to know Luke through our recruitment of Tu Holloway when Sean was the head coach. A guy by the name of Emmanuel Book Richardson, who's on his staff, was very close to Luke and grew up in the same AAU program, if you will. And that's how I got to know Luke. And as I've grown into the job here, he spread his wings and became an assistant coach. You know, he's been at Wagner, he's been at Towson, he's been at Fairfield, or he went to Fairfield, and he's certainly been at Rhode Island with Danny Hurley, and very impressed with his ability to recruit and his ability to connect with players. And I think he's really grown into being a terrific assistant coach with X's and O's. Not to mention, I love the movie Caddyshack. No, I really do. It's a hell of a movie if you haven't seen it.
Stay right in that area, back left standing.
Coach Matt Cameron Cox, 12 News out of Phoenix. What does Sister Fleming mean to this team? And it seems like everybody has a story, favorite story to share with her.
Yeah, Sister Fleming is, she's been with the program well before I was a student athlete at Xavier. And the amount of not just basketball players, but student athletes across the board at Xavier that she's helped in so many ways. You know, whether it was figuring out a career choice, whether it was making sure they didn't fail a class, making sure that you know, they understood that books came before basketball. But make no mistake, Sister plays to win. She wants to win, and she has been the primary reason outside of our players' motivation when they first get to Xavier for the graduation streak of over 100 straight basketball players from our program. That dates back to 1985. Since 1985, there's never been a player that's finished his eligibility at Xavier and doesn't hold their degree. And again, players and their families are very responsible for that because that's one of the reasons they chose Xavier. But Sister's been very instrumental in that as well.
Front row.
Chris, based on NCAA tournament results, the results would seem to be in line with like preseason rankings for you guys. Now, you've obviously said that outside expectations are not something that you really concern yourself with. What was your expectation for this group at the outset, and have they met that?
Well, we set goals, and I'm going to continue to keep those sort of goals in-house. But, you know, my expectations are to continue to improve and get better every single day. And I know that's really cliche, but, you know, we set some lofty goals, and if you fall short of them, that's okay, you know. But not improving, not coming to practice with a great attitude and great effort isn't okay. So in terms of whether we've exceeded or matched or underachieved to other people's expectations, we really don't concern ourselves with that. I am proud of this group because when you set off to start a season, you never know what pitfalls or roadblocks you're going to come across. And there's always going to be some type of adversity through the year. How your team handles it usually reveals the type of team that you have. And our team handled it extremely well, and for that, I'm really proud of our team.
Left side, third row, John.
John Wilner with the Mercury News. Not that Xavier, Big East, Gonzaga are mid-major in any way, but it does seem like the makeup of the at-large field in recent years has skewed towards the Power 5 football leagues. You think the presence of one of the two of you will help maybe reverse that trend?
I don't know. It's an awkward question because, you know, I know there's 5 major conferences with football, but, you know, we feel like being in the Big East, when you get 7 teams out of your 10 in the NCAA tournament, and your regular season and league champion a year ago won the national championship, it just feels like an awkward question. I know everybody wants to label you and box you in, but you know, with these 2 programs, the success they had, I mean, the amount of money and the resources that Xavier and Gonzaga put up compared to some of the middling teams in the Power 5, it's apples and oranges, and that is a big reason why both programs have been able to sustain a whole lot of success recently.
Front row.
Chris, you mentioned some kind of relationship with Mark. If you don't mind me asking, could you expound on the extent of that relationship, and like, do you ever run into him on the recruiting trail, go head to head for guys?
Yeah,
like
I mean,
that?
we don't butt heads on the recruiting trail. Every once in a while with a transfer, and we're 0 for 2, by the way. But I've gotten to know him on the road recruiting, not that we're looking at the same players, but all these kids are national kids and they play in the same tournaments. And then, you know, Nike has a trip for head coaches once a year, and I've gotten to know him. He loves to fish, and I love to fish too. I'm just in Cincinnati at the Ohio River, and he's fishing for, you know, trout in his backyard, so it's a little different. I go carp fishing. But I love to fish, and I love to hear his stories. And Mark, to me, is a guy that knows who he is. He's a family guy. He's as down-to-earth as it gets, and I can connect, and I like guys like that. Not tomorrow, but I like guys like that.
Anybody else? Dan, again.
Chris, Dan Wolken again from USA Today. The fact that you're in the Big East and the fact you talk about the resources, I mean, is Xavier the kind of place where a successful coach can spend their entire career?
If they don't fire you, yeah. I mean, if you want me to expand on it, I'll say, yeah. It might not have been that way 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but I think when you look around and you see the success that we've had versus other programs, I think when you look at the league that we're in, you know, the stats I rattled off before, and understand that a couple of those guys that left Xavier to go to different jobs spent a large part of their professional and personal life in Cincinnati, and with Xavier close to their heart. So I don't think there's any coach in the NBA, in college, in high school that can say, hey, I'm here forever. But when you have what we have at Xavier, it's special, and I don't take that for granted.